Now it's time to bring on our special guest at this point. This man was a 2-time National Coach of the Year, 9-time Conference Coach of the Year, University of Nebraska Hall of Fame, and national champion as well, Mr. Terry Pettit. How you doing, my friend?
Hello, Adam. How are you?
Life is good. Life is glorious. Lots to talk about when it comes to volleyball. I want to get your initial reactions to a couple of things. But when you found out John Cook was retiring, because you were there. You were the guy that kind of handed the baton to him. You were there, that introductory press conference. And now 25 years later, it's come full circle. He's retiring. What were your thoughts when you heard the news?
In some ways surprising, in some ways not. I thought he would go, I think maybe it was last season, he signed a 5-year contract. And, you know, he talked so much about how he enjoyed coaching this particular group. So I thought he would probably go one more year with this group. But I understand. You know, when you reach a tipping point, and my understanding is everything just came together in the last week. That there was no discussion prior to this last week. My situation was different because I made the decision a year before I retired when I brought John in as the associate head coach. And I pretty much grieved that whole season. Fans wouldn't have known it and the team wouldn't have known it. But it was set in motion. And so when we had the press conference, John was, with me stepping down, John was seated right next to me. Now that'll happen next week for Danny, but I don't know that Nebraska or Louisville could have handled this any better. It kind of sets them apart, or the University of Nebraska apart, from how most institutions handle things like this. And you know, when I came to Nebraska, I was a junior college coach and pretty inexperienced, and John had been a successful coach, but had never been to a Final Four. Danny's been to 3 Final Fours and competed in 2 national championships. Mm-hmm. So she's much more experienced than either of us were when we took over.
So talk to me, because some of the first questions I immediately got. Well, let's go to Danny before I get to some of the assistant coaches and players and whatnot. So you started to allude to Danny. Obviously, she's had high success. I talked about this before, but Louisville actually had a losing record, 12-18 the year before they got there. Never been a number 1 seed. Since then, she's won 3 ACC Coach of the Year awards. They won 4 straight ACC championships, as you mentioned. Competed for a couple of national titles, 3 Final Fours. Hosted the Final Four this past year, which I know had to have a ton of pressure. Like, hey, we're hosting. You guys better make it here. Okay, talk to me about what you see from Danny, what you like, and what Husker fans can expect from her potentially. Well, not potentially, but as Nebraska's next volleyball coach.
She was in camp my last year as a head coach, and she was a junior high kid at the time. And I remember Janet Cruz asked me to come down to her court. Janet was coaching the court on the last day and said, watch this kid. And so camp ended, and I went up to her and I said, hey, you're going to come here someday and you're going to be a star. And that didn't have anything to do with her skills or even with her athleticism, but just how she carried herself. I'm so impressed with her. She has, you know, what we refer to as emotional intelligence. Her strongest talent probably is how she relates to her players. And nowadays, that's even more important than ever before because of the portal and NIL. Your roster's changing each year. You have to have that talent. She also is, because she's been at a major program, as you know, it's not just what happens in practice. You have to be able to go out and woo the fan base and woo donors and woo the press, and she'll do all those things at an extraordinary level. I really like her posture during a game. When you look at her facial expression, it's almost like a kid in a candy store, like she's just very joyful about what's happening. So that, you know, nothing's guaranteed. we've seen coaches come in other sports that we thought were no-brainers, but I would be as sure as you can possibly be that she will have an extraordinary career at Nebraska. She's a wonderful person.
So I am curious actually about, because you mentioned, she was in junior high. So you saw her when she was younger, when she was a player. Later on, 4-year starter for John Cook, co-Big 12 Libero of the Year, ultimately won a national title on that team. It was Sarah Paven, Jordan Larson. What a loaded team, Danny Busboom. Okay, but talk to me, as you were watching Nebraska and you were watching Danny Busboom as a player, what were your thoughts as you watched her play for Nebraska?
Well, somebody alluded to this in a YouTube video or a podcast yesterday. Her first 3 years, she was the setter, and then John called her in and told her that he wanted her to move to libero. They'd run a 6-2 in Danny's junior year, and he didn't see her for 3 days, and he called her mom, and she shows up at the office with a long written letter. She'd probably had a chance to reflect and said she'd do everything possible to make the team successful. She's always got it. I mean, she's we can teach certain aspects of leadership, but some of them come naturally to people. She's a natural leader. I think the person that was most important for her to keep on the staff was probably Lindsey Peterson, the director of operations. But she's also keeping Jalen and Kelly Hunter, and those are. It's never going to be easy, but she'll have that. Both she and the team will have are not going to have any extra interference that you normally see when a coach comes in. She knows who these players are. She knows more than if you haven't been a part of Nebraska volleyball, you really can't even imagine it. We see these pro players come in Omaha, and they're just overwhelmed by the interest and the support from the university and the state. So it's certainly the athletic director deserves credit for how he handled it. Louisville deserves credit. John, everybody did it as well as you could possibly do it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's interesting because I heard about that podcast as well, going from changing up their formation, and Cook asked her to go to libero. She may not have had the friendliest reaction ever, ultimately came around and then becomes the Big 12 Libero of the Year. That's a pretty cool story, pretty unique story. It kind of shows her fieriness, yet her willingness to put the team first ultimately in the end as well. And that's another thing I want to ask you about was the assistant coaches and the people that you alluded to. They're coming back. I mean, Jalen Ray's, he's been with us since 2018, which makes him the second longest serving assistant coach in Nebraska volleyball history, only trailing Kathy Noth from 1988 to 1998. So how important is it to retain so many coaches and keep that continuity?
If you look over from 2018 through 2025, Nebraska has had over that span, Nebraska has had, in terms of ratings, better recruiting classes than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even sure it's close. And that's Jalen, because Jalen has been actively involved in coaching U19 teams for USA Volleyball. And because he's so likable and so welcoming, people are first attracted to Nebraska through Jalen. So, that's critical. And then Kelly, led a team to 2 national championships. I always felt it was vital to have somebody whose life was changed because of the program. And that's what Kathy Noth was, and Nikki Stricker and Val Novak for me, and Jordan Larson and Hunter for John. So it doesn't always work out that way, but the fact that Danny's associate head coach could step into that head coaching role at Louisville, because had that not happened, I'm sure she would have wanted to bring him to Nebraska. And there's still a coaching position open, and I have no idea what she'll be looking for in that other coaching position. But but assuming everybody stays healthy, and the fact that the after the announcement, the team asked to be by themselves for a few minutes, and they just committed to make this as interference free as possible for Danny. That doesn't happen everywhere. You recall when the coach that was the football coach following Frank, Bo Pelini,
Mm-hmm.
when he left, it was kind of turmoil, but that isn't the case here, and these days that's very unusual. So I'm very proud of John and how he handled it. This doesn't work if he hasn't set things up to be handed off in that way.
So that's actually that's perfect, because my very next question was, I've been told pretty much everyone's coming back. Harper Murray, the players have decided to come back. In this day and age of NIL, transfer portal, there's going to be normal people that come and go. It's not as drastic as football because there's not as many people on a volleyball team. But even someone like Ali Sheck, who had committed, was going to, transferring from Baylor. She visited schools like Kansas and Oregon and everything else. Cook said he called her and she was crying after the announcement of his retirement, despite everything she said, and I quote, "She's good," end quote. So she's still coming. It seems like everyone's staying. I mean, it seems kind of insanely obvious to say that's a big deal, but just how big of a deal is that?
Well, Adam, I don't know if you heard the other part of that story. She visits Kansas, and Ray Bouchard retires the next day.
Mm.
She visits Oregon, and he leaves for Kansas the next day.
Oh, that's crazy.
So she made 3 visits, and the head coach changed on the following day. But what is there not to like about Nebraska? I mean, you can't imagine support better anywhere else. So that does not surprise me. Plus, she fills a specific need. There's a tremendous advantage in having a left-handed right side player,
mm-hmm.
Because it's much easier for that player to attack the ball when the setter digs the ball and the libero steps up, because the ball is coming to her on her on hand. And I don't know whether Nebraska even has another left-handed player. So she's a very good player. She hit close to 300 in the Big 12. So there would be, and she's got to know Danny Busboom. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody knows Danny, and everybody, you can see Danny's countenance when you just watch her. So that doesn't surprise me. Right now, I can understand, given what we're asking of student athletes today, where basically they're training year round. I can understand if you have, after a couple of years, you just see 2 players ahead of you and you're never going to get on the court. If you're competitive, you want to play. What I don't understand are people that have been playing and you're in a really strong program and you just decide to leave, but it's not going to change. None of this is going to change. I would hope that maybe, even something like when you played, I'm assuming you had to sit out a year if you were going to transfer.
Yes.
And even then, you had to meet before a committee at the university athletic department. Yes. And, that's not coming back either. So whoever adapts the best wins. And Nebraska's showing that it can adapt in this situation. There are only, when I look for someone to follow me, had John not accepted the opportunity to do that, I probably would have coached maybe 2 more years. But I also felt that if he wins a national championship at Wisconsin, why would he come back to Nebraska? Coaches like to do something that hasn't been done there before. And Danny's beloved in Louisville, but I'm sure she also feels she has a better opportunity to compete for national championships at Nebraska. So we may see somebody, as they go through spring ball and it becomes obvious that somebody, an outside hitter, is going to win that position opposite Harper. You might see somebody enter the portal, but we don't have any control over that. All you can do is love them and coach them the best that you can.
Absolutely. I think you make some great points. And with Danny coming back, obviously competing for national titles, I think there's a coming home element to it as well. It was pretty cool to see when Cook was announced last night and Danny was announced in front of the crowd at PBA, the reaction that they got. So that was pretty cool. But hey, Coach Pettit, I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks as always.
Well, thank you, Adam, and good luck. Go Big Red.